It wasn't the traffic, it's just the thing that I moved from the one university in Pretoria to the other university.
Oh, that takes hours.
It took 3/4 of an hour. I was, quite scary. But I went to a very happy occasion. I just came from where somebody did their final open defense of their doctorate. And it went really well. So, I'm in a very positive frame of mind now because you can see that it does happen. And sometimes you forget about it. So one of the things you can do is every now and then during graduation day, just go look at those red coats going up and down. It just helps to focus yourself quite a bit. Okay, I've not bring all the marks. We've got about, out of everybody, and I see there's about 50 now, there's 46 people that handed in their academic literacy. Is there anyone here that has not yet done it? So there must be somebody here. Okay. Can we have them, please? Just do them and send them through to Prof. Barry. So you remember that horrible piece of work, that horrible thing that you had to order sentences and see if things are plagiarized or whatever?
But I sent it via the email. I sent it to Prof.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that I received quite a number, but there are still some that are missing. And there's 50 people here now, but I only have 46. Okay. If you probably have it, I will get the list up and then we'll start checking on Monday. Yeah, I just want to ask people that haven't yet done it to please do so. Okay. We've dealt with current concerns. Is there anything that somebody wants to ask me specifically that hasn't happened? How was your holiday reading? You are broke. Why? Have you, who has not been able to read? Why? What is the issues?
It's long that you've seen your family, everyone just wants to talk to you and whatnot. So.
It is a challenge, isn't it? Somehow between all of this, you've got a life as well. Okay? And you want to enjoy it. One of the interesting things is this guy's defense. His wife wasn't there. Okay? So it's very painful to plan everything in between. But we cannot really go on with assignment 1, and you see now, unless you've read something. Who feel that they've got a better idea of where they are going to play than they did before the holiday? Are you feeling really, really confused at this stage? That's perfectly normal. The first part of reading is really you falling in the deep end and you try to make sense out of this. And the more you read, the more you find out that you don't know, the more you see people's different viewpoints, the more everybody disagrees about the same thing. Is that the kind of things you found out? Nobody agrees. There's different ideas and everybody's talking about different things. And it's as if you're listening halfway into conversations. Because a lot of academic debate is like a conversation going on. And when you pull out 1 or 2 of those documents, whatever article, whether it's a paper or anything, it's a little drop in a conversation. And what you want to do at a master's level, you want to be quite up to speed on what's a conversation, and you want to join it on the sidelines. At a doctoral level, you want to actively participate and contribute to that conversation. So in the beginning, you are picking up little notes of that conversation, and you need to continue to read until you realize what that conversation is about. And preferably at this point, you need to find out where in that conversation do you want to join. What specific conversation do you want to join in? Who of you have picked up the conversation that you like? You've gotten it. Who else? So there's some people that have started to pick up that conversation. Who of you have started glimpsing conversations? You see people, and this person quotes, and it's like a ping pong match. You know? I say something and I quote a few people, mostly saying how wrong they were and how right the person is that I think is right, preferably me, myself, in previous documentation. And then somebody else responds to it. So there's this whole response, people saying things, and you start following. So any document that you've gotten, you must look at who has been quoted. And you'll probably find in that very, very first part of the paper, somebody's been quoted that has really informed this little bit in the conversation. So when you read, it's important not only to read what is being said, but in response to what is it being said. Okay. So the reason that you look at the newest guys is so that you can pick up where in the conversation is it currently happening. If you have, especially at doctoral level, if you read too old stuff, you are going to be missing the conversation. So you've got at least 3 or 4 years to get to be at the top of the conversation. And if you start joining a train of conversation that's already getting old, it's difficult to stay on and make sure that when you start in the conversation that you can have something to say. Okay. Now, think again about what you've read. Those of you that have read, are you starting to get to it? And this picture you'll find in your manual about research, and this is a very real picture. Okay? I don't know who drew it, we all copy and paste it somewhere, so referencing, we don't know. But research is messy. Hopefully at some point, and very often it's quite a way in your conversation, you start finding out where you are now. One of the indications that people are going to drop out of doctoral studies is if they change their title, if they change their topic frequently. So who of you have already registered in what area are you working? Who of you have registered? Full stop. So some of you haven't yet registered. We'll look at those initial things that you have to register. So who have a firm idea of your topic? So that's, and the rest of you, how close are you to getting to that topic? You're getting there. Okay. Now, getting to a topic is one thing. The next thing is getting to a title. At doctoral level and most at master's level, when you get your title, you register that title. So you're sort of demarcating this area, and it happens on a national level. This little area is mine. I'm going to work here. And every time you change your title after that, you have to go through the formal process of registering your new title. So it's very important that you get your little grip and you say, this is my plot, this is where I'm going to play. At a master's level, those changes are not that difficult, but it's still important to demarcate your area. And in your process of reading, you are trying to get to that area. At this point, we assume that you've done some reading, and we assume that you have some idea of what your problem is. This first assignment is pretty close to what you give into when you give your proposal, that first 150 words to register. Probably 2/3 of that document or that piece will come from whatever you've done for assignment 1. If you've got assignment 1 down, then of course you can talk to your supervisor and you can complete that bit about registering your research. So let's start with the fun and games here. And it's not, I don't think it's wrong to repeat this several times. Research is messy. When you report on research, it's according to protocol. And you read this, and every bit, if you read somebody's thesis or somebody's dissertation, it looks so clean, doesn't it? They started, they knew what they're doing, they meaningfully and determinedly walked down this road and they got to the end. But that's just the end. This is just what we write in the end. This is not how it goes. So there's a whole lot of steps moving up and down throughout. It's messy. It's iterative. You go forward, and then you go back a little step, and then you go forward 2 steps, and you go back 1.5 steps. And so you go forward, up and down until you get going. What you want to be is at the end of your proposal, you have a very, very good idea of where you're going. Because if you start going up and down at that stage, you waste a lot more time. So we're going to go very systematically in the first lot, and we're going to up and down several times in an attempt to get you to demarcate your area as soon as possible. It's not a linear process. It doesn't start here and go forward. So you don't say, this is my problem. This is my hypothesis, if you use that. This is my literature. This is my research design. You find out in your research design that, oops, I mistook something. And then you go back and you help your problem to become in line. Okay? Then you go back and so please don't think if you've got your problem statement in the beginning, it's going to stay, and it has to stay the same. As you learn deeper and as you read more and more, which you will continue all the time, remember when you hand in, it's got to be 5 years. So when you hand in, you should still be reading. And you can still move until the very last day. You can move things up and down. So it's not going to be linear. Don't feel really, really intimidated if you're making changes. It's going to happen. There's many models that people describe research. And one of the biggest pains in my soul is this very linear problem. You've got a problem. It follows the whole scientific method. You see that pretty straightforward line? It's not true. It's not even close to true. And it intimidates more people because they think that this is the way it should be. It's not that big. We're going to use a U model. And what it really is that you're going to go cycling through this model over and over and over. And when it's perfectly stable, you cut it open in the middle and you drag it till it's aligned. So don't think that it's got to be straightforward. So the first step in this model, and this is where you should at least be. At this point, you should have a problem area. You should know where more or less you're going to play. Okay. You said you're pretty stable. What is your problem area?
It's to evaluate supply chain management.
No, you're telling me your aim. You're telling me your aim. I'm not interested in your aim at this point. I want to know what's your problem area. Remember, everything is around a problem. Something is happening, and there's consequences, and I want to work at reducing those consequences.
It's the negative audit reports.
Okay, so there are negative audit reports, and it could be due to what kind of things?
Implementation, inadequate implementation, or improper implementation.
Of what?
Supply chain.
Okay, and you're talking now at the supply end of the supply chain, in a municipality. There's some problems around it. Consequences is negative audit reports, and a whole lot of hopefully firing of municipal officers, etc. And you want to address that. So what do you think is going to solve it? What's going to help to reduce that?
If we get the implementation right.
Okay, now what are you going to do to help the implementation? I'm terrorizing him not because of anything, but I know that he's gone a little bit more than you. The rest of you are going to get these questions all the time. So what are you going to do?
Develop a process.
No, what's he going to do?
First, going to ascertain what are some of the challenges with regard to implementing currently.
Deepening your understanding, deepening the knowledge base, and from that, what you're going to do?
Provide recommendations.
Okay. What is your research then about? It's not about generating the recommendations, or is it about generating the recommendations? Now, it's very important to say, if you are going to, your problem that you've defined now is we do not really understand some of these factors, therefore there's failures. So I want to really understand, deepen, so that I can address those failures. Is that what you,
Yes.
on a very, very high level? Okay. Who else is at the level that they can talk about this? Who wants to talk? I keep a list, and if I ask you once, then I mark you off. You join my list by various ways. Men join it by wearing hats in the class. There's a first way, guaranteed way to get asked. You join it by sleeping. Or there's ways that you attract my attention. So who else is ready? Who at the M level is fairly happy? No, but that's one of the things. You are not going to say, lead, one hint. If we do the following, it's wonderful. So you get one article that exactly tells you that this is a problem. This is very difficult. You don't have one point. It's not linear. This guy tells you what to do. If you get that, that's pretty good. But typically, somebody designs their own research. So they scope their future job, like any good consultant. They scope their future job, so they say, this is what should be done. So you're competing with them to get there. So it's very seldom that you will find something precisely that tells you. But what's the problem area that you want to look at?
It's recycling and basically the perception of people. So there's a lot of things around recycling, and but it's such a big area to cover. But I want to go specifically in the hospitality industry as a perception. So
okay. So you want to look at that? So what she's telling me so far is within the hospitality industry, recycling is not happening to the extent it should.
It's already law, but people are not implementing that.
Okay.
That's the problem, but there's no article that I found that specifically says exactly that. You know, you get a lot of...
Okay, are you looking at a doctoral level?
No,
Masters. Okay, so you're scoping your doctoral process here as well. That's the way. I mean, ideally, your master's research tell you, and I go forward from here and I'm doing my doctorate. Okay, that's the ideal situation. So your problem areas within the hospitality industry, recycling is very important for reasons. It's also law. However, it doesn't happen well. So now you're going to look, but that's your wider problem area. Okay. Now you've got to look at your research problem. Your research problem is something different. If you want to do research about in the hospitality area, people aren't doing it, it's very wild, isn't it? There's a lot of things that you can happen in. So in your research problem, you're going to pull one of the research problems out of there. So it could be in the hospitality industry, compliance with legislation is low due to the fact that it can't be measured or that it's not measured. And from that, the consequences is that. So you take one little part of that problem area. So in your case, you've got a problem area that overall there's a very, very bad reputation around compliance or effective supply chain management in municipal areas, and there's many consequences. But that's not your research problem. That's a wider area of your problem area. Okay. Anybody else wants to now make a statement about the research or the overall problem area? That lady with the pink t-shirt. Okay, are you at the M level and a D level? I mean, pink is easy to see, so go. At your master's or doctoral level? Okay. In what area are you doing in what department are you doing your doctorate?
Yeah, I'm in business school.
Okay.
Yeah, so my research area is on banks, looking at the customer loyalty retention issues of the bank.
Okay, so your area that you're working out is customer loyalty and retention, bank retention. She doesn't like Steve. Okay, obviously that's one of the things. Okay, so you're looking at retention. Now, why is it important to look at retention in banks?
Yeah, the background of my own study is based on the fact that for the past few years there have been reforms going on in the banking sector.
Yeah.
And then these reforms are actually meant to kind of stabilize the banking sector.
Yeah.
And then the major people involved are the customers.
Okay.
Because of these reforms, there have been a lot of switching, customer satisfaction, that kind of thing.
Okay, but could it be that switching of customers between banks have been made much easier recently? People are more aware. There's a lot of things that make switching possible. So that's a problem area. There's switching, and it's very bad if you've invested a lot of money into that customer and they just hop next to somebody else. Old age, a long time ago, you got this little now I show my age, you got this little money bank, you put your money in, if you were really good, it had a name of a bank on it, and then you got your savings plan at that bank, and then you got your study loan at that bank, and then you were locked in. Now it's no longer the case. And there's a variety of reasons, isn't it? But that's overall. Now, what do you think will be your research problem?
Yeah. The research problem now is trying to understand those factors that account for the switching.
Okay, so the understanding of the factors that currently accounts is not well, there's no good and deep understanding. Therefore, banks cannot put in measures to combat them, or something like that. I mean, there's no way so I can set up a research problem that somebody's going to spend 5 or 6 years working on, or 4 years, or 3 years, or 2 years, whatever, in 2 minutes. But that's the kind of thing that you're looking. What she's also illustrated is the context. So what's the context that this research is happening in? Are you looking at a developing world as a context? Are you looking in South Africa at the banking industry? Or are you looking internationally at the banking industry? So that's important. So that talks about the context. Who else can I corner? That lady just fell asleep there in the corner. Ha! Got you. Okay, what's your research problem? Now you're hiding behind the paper. This one. At what level? Yeah. At what level are you doing your research?
It's factors like infant talent management in mind health.
Now you're giving me your title. I'm asking what's the problem area that you're working in?
Or the problem area.
Okay, give me your title again.
It's the factors that impede talent management in mind health and safety.
In mining health and safety.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can start by saying health and safety in South Africa is specifically a massive concern. If you start looking at mining health and safety and you state all these things, it is really, really serious. And one of the key issues is that you cannot find competent people to appoint at the various levels of the law.
Yeah.
Okay. And this needs to be addressed. How can that be done? Therefore, my research problem is we don't really understand the factors that impede talent development. Can you see how I'm talking through that? Your context would be mine health and safety. In South Africa, or mine health, are you looking internationally?
No.
South Africa, why? Why is it not the same? Another question, why is it not the same as, say, health and safety in China, in mines? What makes it different? So there's a lot of things that you have to take into account when you design it. So there's a whole trade-off when you start looking at your problem area and getting to your research problem. That's the first thing. So within your problem area, there's a research problem. In fact, within every problem area, there are several research problems. So by the time you've got your problem area, what you're grappling with is what research problem do I want to grab? Which one meets my requirements? And it's very, very important because you have to really prove. You can only say there's a problem if you're a full professor and you're dead, at least for 5 years. Okay? Then you have the right to say it's a problem. Until that time, you have to prove that it's a problem. And it's a real pain. You can't say, you know what, mining health and safety is an issue, and you carry on from there. You've got to bring evidence to say why mining health and safety is a problem. You've got to bring in evidence to say why are people not proceeding? Why do you not develop enough people? What's the evidence that can tell that? So within your problem area and getting to your research problem, you have to bring evidence, empirical evidence. In her case, things like reports by the mining ministry would be important. Things like the impact of the new mining safety rules. All of those things are important, and that tells you. So you won't get a single thing that say, ta-da, mining health and safety, talent management is an issue, and I go from there. You pull out little bit that say mining health and safety is an issue, talent management issue, and you start substantiating, you're pulling evidence together. In management areas, it is very unlikely that you're going to use a single bit of literature that tells you this body of knowledge doesn't exist. You have to bring evidence empirically. Now, newspaper reports aren't really good empirical areas unless you have about 300 of them that build on top of each other. Government reports are good areas. In your case, you probably look at the recent Auditor General's reports. You look at bank. In your case, what would you use?
Yeah, from the newspapers.
Yeah, but remember, a single newspaper article isn't good enough. However, if you've analyzed newspaper, stating that over the period, the last 6 months, the frequency of newspaper dealing with this has been that many, whatever you want to. You want to bring evidence. You want to prove this is a problem, this is really a problem, everybody says it's a problem. But this is academic discourse. So everybody says empirically, and in the theory, somewhere in one of these articles that I've read, I pick up that they also agree that there's a problem. They will not say exactly, if you start looking at your area, that is a problem. You're not going to find that. You'll find a few that puts together a picture that shows around this, actually we can't. Or you look at some model or some solution that happened and say it's not good enough. And you've got to prove why it's not good enough. Okay. Now, if you're working at a doctoral level, that body of knowledge substantiation is not only that there is a real problem, it's that there is nothing out there that fixes it. There's no solution to this problem currently available that is academic knowledge. Okay. Very, very important. And then you get your research problem. There, what you then do is you beat up that little research problem, you force it into a block, you slash it, you make it very neat, and you can turn it into a research question. Your research question you can beat up until it's a hypothesis, or you can carry on with it. But fundamentally, that first few bit, and this is where this assignment is from looking that it's a problem area. There is a research problem, it's a real problem. It needs to be addressed, and if I address it, I'm going to say something meaningful. Then you start beating it up into a question. You break that question down into something, some form of argument that I can say, if I answer this, I can build up an argument that I can answer my research question. That is around assignment 3. We're going to go into that in quite detail. Then you go around, and you look at this whole thing. The moment people start using your focus is out. You don't understand what the scope of research is. What you have to look at is that there has to be very, very strong alignment between the problem area that you start off with down to your research sub-questions or your sub-hypothesis or your suppositions, or whatever you want to use there. There's got to be a very, very strong alignment. So you can't start with a problem area here and then miraculously get to a research question here. It's got to be very, very well aligned. And that has to happen in your first, basically, maybe 10 pages. You've got to get that alignment, and you've got to say, this is really a problem. If I answer it, I'm contributing, I'm the coolest thing ever, and you carry on. So that alignment is very quickly. What happens is you start with that problem area, you write and you write and you write, and then you start and fiddle with your research question. And it gets out of alignment. So it's not a single, you don't start on the bottom and you get there. You're going to work with this thing up and down, and if you fiddle with one thing down there, up, it must be moved again. But this is the heart of your research proposal. That you know what the problem is, and that you know how you can, what people know about the problem now, and that you can answer the question. Now, another thing why your research problem is so important is that the same words that you use in your research problem is the aim of your research. And the same words go into your title. So your problem area, the moment you've got your problem area clear, you can determine what the title of it should be. And you should have your aim. We'll get through that now. I know you're looking at me as if I'm now saying something that's really, really foreign. The next thing is, in order to build that argument where the green blocks comes from the literature and the pink blocks come from whatever empirical work you're going to do, you have the literature and you have reality. And reality is nasty and messy and horrible. Okay. But you have to get some empirical evidence out of the reality to prove your argument. All that your research methodology, which is that little oval up there, is about how are you going to get hold of the bits of reality that you need to support your argument. Structured argument, you can start pulling evidence out of the literature, out of reality, and you answer your whole research question. Out of your research question, you can say, done my research problem, I've contributed to the research problem area. And in management, you don't only contribute to the body of knowledge, there must be some implications, some practical use of what you're doing. It's very important, especially in the business school. That contribution becomes really, really important. And the way it works is you're going through there from the one up to the other, and you're closing that off. But you don't go through it once. You're going through it cyclical over and over. And as you realize that you can't quite answer this question, you go and fiddle with the rest earlier until you've got it well aligned. So that alignment, that pink circle has to be aligned. And if you touch any one element, the others are going to move out of phase. You're going to bring them back into phase. Then you cut it and you pull it open. Then you have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and your reference is chapter 6. So you will all the time, until you put the final little save now and make 300 copies and arrange for police escort to get the document in, make 100 copies and things like that, you will be fiddling with every single element in your overall thesis, in your overall dissertation. So we're trying to get you to stabilize the initial bit as soon as possible so that you don't have to rework too many times. That does not mean that you will not rework. So at this moment, what you are trying to do, you are trying to find out where is that conversation going on that I would like to join in the literature. If you start working in an area that's multidisciplinary, you have to pick up from little bits of conversations that's going on in various disciplines and pull them together. If you're working in a single discipline, you're trying to grab a conversation and follow on with it. Ultimately, if you structure it well, your objectives come straight forward and you answer your objectives. Remember, that's what people look at. Real problem, you read the introduction, you read the conclusion, you read the references, and then you fill in the middle. That's the way people, I don't know, how else do you examine? Anybody else examine differently? That's what you do. Introduction, conclusion, is it well aligned? What did they refer to? And then I work out that they've done it properly. That's the way your stuff is examined. So you've got to be able to map over from the end, clear objectives. Chapter 5 ends up with, or chapter 4 ends up with, met my objectives, or chapter 5, depending where you're putting it. Met my aim, I've contributed, I am so cool, and I'm going to wear the appropriate hat and gown very soon. Okay. So, sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Now, how are you going to get there? Who's about to get there? The lady with the black that's looking bright and really thinking deep. How far are you towards getting there? Are you doing a master's or a doctorate? Okay, how far are you at getting to that conversation that you want to be? Starting to, did you read? Okay, so you're starting to pick up conversations.
I don't believe anybody has read because no one has sent me one picture.
Evidence, remember? You can't state this until you provide evidence. This is worse than a court of law. If you've ever tried to talk to a lawyer, they sit there and you say, this is what happened. They say, can you prove it? Okay. If you can't prove it, it didn't happen. Academic is exactly the same. You can't prove it, it didn't happen. So, your research problem is not your research topic. Most of you have an idea of what your research topic should be. At least you know in what department you are, you've got some idea where around you want to do your research topic. It's not your research topic. I've put in there as a group. Typically that's when we use as a group. I should have taken that out. But there is many, many possible problems in a research topic. To get that topic, you should be able to frame that research topic. It's not your research problem. It's not your supervisor's job to find your problem. In fact, and we'll get to the outcomes now, it's not even supposed to be your supervisors. According to that little stamp of approval that you get when you get your qualification, you are able to find meaningful problems. So you have to come out. Sometimes your supervisor can guide you, but you have to be able to find that. And for those of you with doctoral studies, very soon you'll be sitting and supervising your own students. And you don't want to find them problems. They want to find their own problems. You're not redoing your doctorate through their hands. They've got to do it. It's very, very slow and frustrating. And the context of the problem is different in different disciplines. So let's start with something. What kind of problem do you need? Okay. Who else is from the business school? Okay, the two of you. Okay. 2 people from the business school. Who's in marketing? Oh, that whole string there. Good. What part of the business school work are you doing? Yeah, what kind of topic are you working on? Okay. SMMEs for the financial. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Social entrepreneurs and business
Strong entrepreneurial SMME line there, isn't that? Okay. One of the things you find out is when you start talking to people where they're doing their work, you will pick up where's the strength of a certain department. Okay. So, if you do your doctorate, what will happen with your choice of topic? It will be very, very clear to where you will get your guidance. It will move around and you will be helped along to your guidance. If you have a very, very definite idea of where you want to do it, you try and convince that supervisor, wherever they are, to be your supervisor. But most of the time, it's relevant to your discipline, but it's being guided to where the expertise is that is available to you. The next thing about it, okay, and it must be relevant to your discipline. Now, unfortunately, there are many disciplines that if you say this is relevant in my discipline, some of the guys that really work in this area say, no, it's not. It's really so far out, it's not. Okay. And although it might be perfectly relevant to your discipline, if you cannot convince your supervisor that it is so, you've got a problem. So you've got to get to a level, and pretty much you're in a catch-22. You have a supervisor, or you're being allocated a supervisor, and you have to come to some alignment about what's relevant. It must be a real problem. If you cannot substantiate that this problem happens and there's empirical evidence for it, it's no good. If you're at DD level, you have to actually substantiate that it will contribute to the body of knowledge, or it's no good. You can do a wonderful study. At the end it says, but is it a D or is it 5 or 6 masters? It is perfectly possible to do a number of master study together and try and pretend that it's a D. It's not. Because you never have gone into the contribute to the body of knowledge. You've done a lot of work. You could have done it excellently. It could be wonderful work. But it does not contribute to the body of knowledge. So unless you can start off with a problem that you really know it's going to contribute, you might end up 2 years down the line and work out, oops, somebody already wrote exactly this. Remember? Because new articles, new information comes out all the time. So you don't want somebody to say, sorry, I got it, you try something else. Because you can't do a repeat study. So it's got to be this. Another thing is who owns the problem. It's very important when you start thinking there's a problem, but you cannot find the owner. That fact, if you start looking at whether people have supply chain problems, whose problem is it? Whose problem is it? Who owns the problem?
Those who are in authority to implement it.
Who owns the problem? Who experiences the problem? Whose problem is it? It depends. That is a problem that's a problem for the Director, Auditor General, obviously. It's a problem for the municipality. It's a problem for a number of places. And that is where you're making your contribution to. So if you don't understand, on SMMEs, what are you working on SMMEs?
To see the effect of access to finance on small and medium enterprises.
Of access to finance. Are you doing a master's or doctoral? Okay. Now, on this field, there is an incredible amount of literature. If you look at access to small and medium guys, you'll find work in China, you'll find work over the world, you'll find a lot of work in South Africa, you'll find it in specific industries, there's a lot of work. So your challenge from the very beginning is to find out that little angle that you can do that's uniquely yours that nobody have yet done. Or the previous guys that did it half-heartedly. I can do it better. Okay. So, and that's a challenge. So first thing, you want to find something that you want to look at, that you want to do that. But why should anybody be worried about that?
I'm interested on looking the effect of access to finance on the productivity and profitability.
Okay, but who's worried about that profitability? Who can use your information? Who's going to use that? For who is it going to be important to answer that question? For the enterprise, for the banks, for the government? Who is it? You have to pin that down because that drives a lot of what you're going to do because that's where you're going to do in order to do something for somebody. If you don't know where is the problem, who's got the problem with this, you can't contribute, can you? And very often you sit in this area, I know it's a problem. And at the end, your examiners sit back and say, so what? Who of you have seen so what written on your work? I'm really good at that. I can't remember how many times I put the so what with a question mark, and with my handwriting, that's one thing you can actually read because I tend to write it big. Okay. Okay. So you have to find out why. So the whole issue that you're starting, what's the rationale of this? Why are you doing it? Is it just to write something that extend them knowledge? Is there some meaning to it? Why? So what? And we'll get to that now. And that's a very important question. I know we don't want to ask it. But if you can't address that, you'll get that so what in various forms. Some people are a little bit more sophisticated in the way they put it. They could say, and what do you think the contribution of this will be? Could be something like that. I'm pretty straightforward about these things. But if you don't know who owns the problem, you don't know what will the aim of solving that problem contribute. Why are you doing it? So you've got to look at who owns it. If you're looking at that, what future contributions are you doing? So I solve this, so where am I going to answer it? If I don't know whose problem it is, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, do I? And what benefits can I get? Now, if you don't have at least 3 or 4 things that you're going to get out of this, you're going to get the degree. Why do you want it? Who of you are academics? Who's the academics here? Why do you need the degree? To get promoted. To keep the job. Who else are doing doctorates that are not in academia? Why are you doing it? To get your job. Where, in what area are you? Where do you work? Science and technology. That's, you know, in the research area, that's very important. Who else? Who else is doing a doctorate? Remember, I'll get you 4 ladies. I know you are there, but let me get to him first. Why are you doing a doctorate? Yeah.
I'm doing a master's.
Are you doing a master's? Who's doing a doctorate? Why? Promotion. Sometimes it's for self-expression. In my case, the part that got me really through it was being pregnant during it and being told by these blinky little nurses, Miss or Mrs. And you know, I kept it because I knew that one day I'm going to tell that little cow, doctor, thank you, you little sod. Okay? It helps you. So there's a number of reasons you need that very, very intense need to prove something. And one is never good enough. Okay? You need something that carries you through the whole lot. So you need to understand, why am I doing it? Am I expanding my knowledge? Am I making myself more marketable? A lot of people change careers. That's why they do a doctorate. But there's a reason why you're doing it. And for masters, it's the same thing. If you're doing your masters en route to your doctorate, you want to find a master's that pretty much shape where you're going to go to. Because then your next step is just so much easier. What else? Why else would you do who else is doing a master's?
No, I'm doing a doctorate.
Yeah?
2 things. The first one is that I've never been to graduation at all. I just collect certificates. And the black gown, I said, no, it must be a ring. And then secondly, the area which I'm involved with in my private capacity, it needs you being an expert.
Okay.
People have to listen to you. You really have to have the knowledge.
There's 2 things in there. The one is credibility. If you consult to government, that title means credibility.
Who's talking?
Who's talking? Never mind what you know. And the other area is to have detailed knowledge. Okay. What else? Can you get yourself ahead in your work because you know more? Are you going to really, really be able to, next time you apply for some appointment, you get a really, really good job? What's it going to do for you? And you need to have that burning need to succeed.
I also just want to ask, will this tie in with what you're trying to say? Also, why you do research, maybe if we're all academics, to also publish, to be able to write articles, get something.
Yeah, but then what you're saying is you want to get to the top of your field and you want to stay there. So it's not only to get it, but to get a solid base from which you will publish. You'll publish, if you don't harvest 4 out of your doctorate, apparently you're useless, but you want to continue on it. So the problem area that you find is determined by this. The problem area that's right for you has to actually help you to achieve all your objectives. If it's just to get a degree, that's one thing. If you want to target a certain career area, you've got to find a problem that's in that career area. So what your problem is really influenced by what you want to do. You want to publish. You want to get into a field that has a life cycle. You don't want to get into something that's old, preferably something new and exciting that you can be part of during your career. So your problem area is really determined by what do you want to get out of this research. Next one, can I live with that problem for years? you're going to sleep, you're going to talk to it, it's going to be all over you, and you're going to get bored. You're going to get really, really, really bored. You're going to get really, really tired. Is this exciting enough to keep you going? And then, can I attract a suitable supervisor? Who of you have not yet been given a supervisor? Everybody's got one. It's important. And finding something really exciting, you can convince a supervisor to take you on. Because the supervisor also have to get something out of that. It's not that we supervise students because we really feel that this is the way to our future life. Because I supervise because I enjoy finding out new things. Best way to find out new things is by doctorate students that are chasing down new things. It's wonderful. Why do you do it? So you want to attract a supervisor. Okay, so finding a problem, when you start looking at a problem, if you look at the current research, you've been reading. So in this reading, you would have picked up where research is happening at this moment. That probably will direct quite a lot, especially if you want to carry on an academic career with future publications. So you want to find something that's hot and likely to stay hot academically for some time. If you're at a D level, is it something that you're carrying on from your master's level? Very often it's around what funding can you get. And I think people in the research areas, very often it's linked to what funding you get. Who of you are funded by or working on some funded research project? So your topic is pretty much, this is what they're willing to pay for and this is where you're going to play. Okay. It's very often driven. It could be just straightforward identified from literature and you pick up something. You can find a problem anywhere, but you've got to be practical. Remember, you don't want to change the world, you want to get a degree. Okay, so it's about finding that problem, finding a problem that's suitable, but also finding a problem that's doable. And very often you find people in the first round, you find a problem and you get that problem area and you drag down, you catch out of there a problem, research problem that is so big that it's going to probably take you at least another 10 years to solve it. That's not a good problem. You want to get one that you can do in the time. And that trade-off is quite important. And you will be going through that over and over. Okay. I want to talk about something that's really, really painful. And one thing that nearly everybody, if not all of you, will ask, is this the right level problem? And what you need to do is you need to, most of it is in here, you need to get the NQF level descriptors. This is the South African descriptions of what is a doctorate, what is a master's. Now at a master's level, it's level 9. What it says is regarding the scope of knowledge, you have to be able to demonstrate specialist knowledge. You have to engage with and critique current knowledge, top knowledge. You have to have advanced scholarship. It also says you have to solve problems. Now this describes your problem. You have to be able to demonstrate. That's one of the reasons. You've got to be able to use this problem in your answering, demonstrate a wide range of specialized skills. Yeah?
The last time I checked, NQF level, they were 9, they were 8.
10. The new lot is 10.
They are 10 now.
10.
Yeah, they've changed it.
Your new change.
There's a new IGQF that's only like come into being now.
Yeah, it's about 2-3 years that it's been.
We're all busy recurriculating towards that. And
So you're
up to
yeah.
level 10. So PhD is level 10.
Master's is level 9. Every now and again there's down. So first year after school I think is level 5, level 6, level 7, level 8. Yeah. Okay. So level 9 is what talks to you. So you have to find a problem that you can demonstrate these things. You've got to design and implement. So you've got to be able to something that your mode of inquiry is worthwhile. A complex and challenging problem. So that's the whole description. It's got to be complex, it's got to be challenged. And you've got to understand what's the consequences. So I go through here and I ask you, why, so what? Consequences. If you don't know what the consequences of your problem is, what the consequences of solving your problem is, you do not meet this criteria. The next thing, around information, you've got to demonstrate and the ability that you can design and implement a strategy for the process and management of information. Now your reading is one of those. Reading, you want to get what is out there now. Not new things, but what do people know now. So you have to demonstrate in your literature review that you can find that and you can put a comprehensive review of what is current research in this area. So you've got to be able to do and to produce significant insights. So it doesn't have to be wonderfully new, etc., but you have to understand, be able to pull it together and put significant insights. Producing of information, please note that producing and communication is very important. You use language to communicate. You also use diagrams. And if I ever again see one little pie chart after another that has no meaning, you've got to be able to get things together and communicate it to a wide range. And if you start looking at, you've got to be able to use academic and professional resources to communicate and defend. So you have to come up with an argument, you've got to communicate that argument, you've got to defend that argument within an area of specialization, and you've got to use a number of skills in your process of getting there. That doesn't mean that every single one of you have to use a lot of statistics. Doesn't mean anything, but you've got to use a range of skills. It's not only about doing one thing, a range of skills. Scope of knowledge at doctoral level. You've got to demonstrate expertise, critical knowledge at an area at the forefront of the field. The forefront moves rapidly. In some areas it moves daily. Okay? So you have to find something that you, when you get there, in 4 years, 3 years, 2 years' time, you are still at the forefront. And you have to be there. In your case, you want to continue your academic career, so you want to get something that you will stay in the front. And you have to conceptualize new research initiative and create new knowledge. But at the end, it says you can do that. So what we do to you when you finish, we say, lovely, here's a person that wants to become a doctor. Now it's your turn. You got the resources, people helped you, now it's your turn. Okay. So you need to be able to do it again. Now this is very difficult because you don't have to be able to do this at the beginning of your doctorate. But that's what you have to be able to display at the end of your doctorate. So at this point, you may not very well know how you're going to do that, but you have to have a very good idea. Problem solving, okay? It's a specialist knowledge and theory in a critical, reflexive, creative, and novel way to address complex, practical, and theoretical problems. So it's got to be a very, very strong theoretical problem. You cannot only substantiate from a practice-based problem unless you ground that in theory and you prove how you have expanded on the theoretical base. And that's very often at universities of technology, that's a massive challenge. The way that you deal with problems tend to be practical. It tends to be, is this a problem? Where does it come from? So you have to find a problem that's a theoretical problem. Your body of knowledge have to tell you that's a problem. Otherwise, it's no good. And, very important, you have to use creative and novel ideas. So you can't just take somebody else's research design and apply it. You've got to put it together. You have to be able to look at a wonderfully new idea of putting this information together. So you can do work that has been answered, say, in a very, very qualitative way, but not yet quantitatively. Or it's been looked at quantitatively, but the deep, deep qualitative knowledge isn't there. So you've got to be very creative in how you do that. Information. Now that's a part that most of you will have experience at this point. See that incomplete and inconsistent. Especially at a doctoral level, there's a lot of incomplete and inconsistent literature out there. If everybody agreed, there would be no point in having an academic career. No, we could have put it on the computer and you could have read it and there you go through. So you have to be able at a doctoral level to read through all that knowledge, put it together in a framework and work out what to do when it's inconsistent and incomplete. But it is going to be inconsistent and incomplete. And you've got to analyze and synthesize. And that's where the fun and games start with the literature review. While we don't yet start with your literature review, putting together your literature review is not he said, she said, and then. It's putting it together and synthesizing your argument on this. But at a doctoral level, it's very, very important that it's going to be complex, abstract, and new. Communicating, please look at that. Significant contribution to the discipline and field. Communicate strategy to disseminate. So one of the things that will be expected at the doctoral level is that you will have a dissemination strategy. I will complete my thesis. I will go to 2 or 3 conferences to share my knowledge and get information back. I will publish these or whatever articles. I will go to this colloquium. What am I going to do about it? So your dissemination strategy is very, very critical at a doctoral level. So, back, rethink. Anytime you have a confusion about whether that problem is suitable, just go through the NQF and look at what it's necessary that you need to do. If you can't understand, if you can't interpret that, you can get guidance, you can ask around that, you can discuss that. But at the end of it, you need to be able to be certain of what that quality is. We do not want to throw you in the deep end, tell you, go forth and see if it works. It's way too much effort. It's way too much that has been committed in you sitting here. We want you to know from the beginning that your problem is capable of delivering the end. You're not going to start, and at the end, if you hand it in, people said, oops, sorry, we don't want to go there. So, do you have empirical problem? Where is it discussed? Who grapples with the problem? Who's the co-author? Is this problem in your specific circumstance? Will you get your sponsor, preferably something that trusts, that believes in you and gives you a lot of money around it? And can you find it in the literature? If you find something that has too little literature around, it is very problematic. And sometimes it's worthwhile to just move your focus a little bit to find a place where you have literature in. But anybody that brings me an area that you don't find literature in, we'll run a competition between the two of us, and we'll see how many literature pieces we find out that's relevant, and you buy the bottles of wine. Okay? Red wine. It's winter, red wine is okay. Okay. Spoken about that? Problems. Who else has got problems? We've discussed some of those problem areas. Who else has got a problem area they want to discuss? Let's talk about it now. You're going to continue talking about that. Do you understand what a colloquium is about? Your oral. You're going to stand there, you're going to talk about it, and people are going to attack you from everywhere. Rather get used to putting your ideas. It's not you, it's your ideas out. Who else wants to talk about their problem? Yes?
My problem area is in food service management.
Okay.
Especially in public hospitals.
Okay.
They move, and then the posts are left there gaps. They normally move and vacate to public sectors.
Okay.
It's a big problem. Then they've got to see to it that they train supervisors to management level.
it's very much similar to what she's talking about. Conceptually, you're also looking at that talent development that continues to, yeah?
Now, the problem as it is, my question, if it would be in the programs for the research, was to have a return, look at the government, because it's public hospital. What is the government, the Department of Health's retention strategies and other factors involved, such as job satisfaction and the rest?
Okay.
To see to it that it can sustain their food service managers for them not to move out to
Okay. Are you working at a doctoral level?
M level.
M level. So at the M level even, first thing that you have to look, if you start looking at literature there, look at all retention strategies in government, especially retention strategies of support services, because that's a support service. So you start, maybe you'll find nothing in there that talks about retention strategies in food services, but you'll find in support service. And you may not only find in South Africa, you might find international. And please remember, you're not getting a South Africa only doctorate. So the moment you move out of the country, it's no longer a doctorate. You've got to deal with international literature. It's at the forefront, not at the forefront in South Africa. It's at the forefront, okay? So you can look at things around that. Then you can start saying, what are retention strategies? What retention strategies work? What are being put in place? Why don't they work? So there's a lot of things in there that you can look at a problem area. There's a problem area. It's a very rich area. It's very relevant. There's a lot of issues in it. And certainly anybody that has suffered hospital food will know how important it is. Okay? So you look at that and you find that problem area. There's a number of really exciting stuff. In what department are you working? Okay. That topic, you could do pretty well in the HR department, can't you? There's strong HR issues. If you put in hospitality, what slight angle do you have to look at? You probably have to look at that overall in hospitality. So you're looking at the retention of that in the hospitality, it's a hospitality service within another industry. And that happens very often. You find a problem, that SMME problem. It could be run from finance. You could run it from the economics department, but you are running it from the business school. So the way that you angle your problem will be from a business school lens. Because otherwise you sit there and you give the problem and somebody says, now why on earth should we give you a doctorate in management or in, say, in a business school if there's no business school problem here? And it happens. It's really a very, very nasty situation. So when you feedback, your supervisor has to guide you that the angle on the problem is relevant to your discipline or the field that you are doing your study in. Most of these problems can be looked at from a number of angles. Your angle is where you are enrolled in, and it's got to stay there, otherwise it gets very uncomfortable. Or you have to change departments, and that's also not pleasant.
Can it be viewed from different angles or multi-perspective angle?
You
know
can.
what I'm asking? We are, as academics, who are busy producing food service management students who are going to fill the food service management position. It's an angle towards the industry, the academic part, and also in hospitals. So it can be, that's why I'm asking.
You can angle that to say, this retention is a very important aspect. So the graduates that you develop, that you deliver, are they ready to go into and progress rapidly enough to take that high level? Then what you're looking at is you're looking at the competencies demanded by industry at the different levels and the competencies that you are developing in your students. So then you can look at the competencies, how the whole curriculum has been designed, or you can say, listen, in industry they need them to really be able to manage staff, but we're not training them how to manage staff. Maybe we need to work on the curriculum. That's pretty much education type focus, but you find that a lot of the areas are have a slight education, but you can angle it from that point. So there's a number of ways that you can angle it, every single one. And you want to be exciting. You want to do your doctorate afterwards?
I want to do, because in the end, I just want to look at the Department of Health and the hospitals, public hospitals, retention strategies, and then develop a model
Okay.
that can benchmark both the public hospitals and the private, if it's possible.
Yeah, but a benchmark alone is not good enough for a doctoral. Remember, you've got to develop
Retention
something.
model?
Retention model, what's going to be different in your retention model? That's the kind of things that you have to look. So you may not find an article that says there's a problem with the retention models. You might find something that you say, I've looked at this model, it doesn't deal with this. I've looked at this model, it doesn't deal with this. I looked at this model, it doesn't deal with this. So I need to develop a new model that is really going to work. Then you're contributing. So some of your, and that is what you do in your literature review. You look at the possible solutions that is there and challenge that to say why what is there is not good enough.
Another question with regards to the literature review that you're currently doing, because I'm in the industry doing the recycling, trying to implement it, working with the people, seeing that they don't know, getting all the different questions. So I know it's a problem because I work with it every day.
Yeah.
How do you now put what you know? That's what I'm struggling with. I'm getting articles, but because I really know what the problem is, because I'm working with it, I'm not getting something that is
That's precisely focus. You're not going to find something say that there's a problem with pink ping pong balls in China. You've got to look at problems with ping pong balls, you've got to look at China, and you've got to look at the problem with pink, which is up there, okay? Do you know that the color Barbie pink is trademarked? The color is trademarked, exactly, because it's so recognizable to a certain grouping of female people there and lower, I think. But so you might look at the problem with pink as well, but you're not going to find something specifically. So in your case, the challenge is, and when we get to the structuring, your challenge is going to find out what are you looking at, what is the underlying literature. So your literature is going to be probably around successful recycling. Overall, look at what drives successful recycling.
So a lot of the information that I currently have is what we're currently learning out of doing the whole process.
Yeah, but so you've got to look at literature. What literature? And look at the following terms: success drivers in recycling. Just look at those. You get a, how many? You get a whole lot up there, and then you start scanning through that. Because literature is no longer about finding literature, it's about wading through that literature and choosing which ones you want to read. Okay? So you've got to look at that recycling. Then you have to look at specific challenges in adherence to legislation within the hospitality industry. Because then you're starting to angle it from everywhere to try and find what literature you can. So you say the hospitality industry is very problematic for these and these reasons. They don't really like following legislation. It tends to be at so many different points that it's difficult to enforce that. You can then start dealing with all the challenges of food recycling, overall recycling. The fact that you start recycling, you start batching things together that could attract rats, cats, or whatever you want to have. So you can start finding that bits of information, and from that, you're starting to find literature.
150,000 results in 47 seconds.
Okay. There's information. You just have to be very creative at how you try and bite that. And as I said, it's a very real problem that you know what the practice problem is, but you have to find literature that supports it. And that literature doesn't have to be exactly precisely on that area. It's got to be, could be quite wide. Yeah?
I'm looking at underachieving students.
Yeah?
From the previous excluded students who are still failing after they've been readmitted.
Okay, so it's repeat failures. Repeat offenders, yeah. And are you doing already, are you doing something about that? So are you looking at what drives them, or are you looking at why your interventions that you're already putting in place aren't succeeding?
Well, there are many factors, and there's a lot of literature that has been written about students failing, all types of it. But when I go through all those, there's very little that has been said about the repeaters.
Okay, so you're really looking at that. So you're looking at people that have already had interventions and are not succeeding from whatever is put in place.
They've been, it's very little bit challenging. They've been excluded.
Okay, but I just want to demonstrate what we're now doing is we're using language to articulate. Those thoughts sit in your mind. You know exactly what it is. But when you have to use words to put it out, it's just so difficult, isn't it? Because you can't get at the thought. You can't rip up in my mind and put your thoughts straight in there, and I get it. You've got to use words to convince, to get me onto your page.
They've been excluded.
Yeah.
They're given a last chance
Okay.
by the university to succeed.
Okay.
They still fail.
Okay. Now, the thing there is, could be, they have there. So you could look at a problem from that to say, you want to design interventions
The intervention model
that would,
to enhance the underachieving students who have been
to include their success the second time around, to increase their success the second time around.
okay.
Now, I'm saying that could be something. That could be something. In your case, you're at TUT. So you're looking there at an interest driver that the institution's interest in it is high. So your owner of the problem, probably you can get more support through that. So you're looking at problems that are really very rich in a driver. However, also if you've done it, you know what, there are many other universities struggling with this problem. And it's just so much better to have something under your belt that could mean something to somebody else.
And interesting, I think my reading right now is looking at what's the current status in South Africa. And as you said that sometimes you are not going to get articles that are talking directly to that, but they're talking about the graduate output.
But
in South Africa.
there would also be things that talk about the lived experiences of students that fail tertiary education, higher education. So you would be starting, so your study, in fact, you can do a study that really goes deeply, qualitatively, into how they experience what is driving their failure. You can do a study that's very quantitatively and trying to actually determine that factors, model that. There's a variety of things that you can do. But the first thing is to find that problem. It's a real problem. I'm sure you can get evidence for that. This literature problem. So don't try and look at the failure or something like that. Try and look at the reasons that people fail in the first time. You can, one of the problem areas that you find that there's a lot of work, there will be a lot of work, and probably here the case is first generation students.
Yes, first generation students.
So you'll find a lot of work around first generation students. Anybody else? Yeah.
You said earlier there is a lot of research on SMEs and financial aspects.
Yeah.
What I'm interested is to see the significance by using empirical evidence.
Okay.
The significance of that financial impacts, especially in developing countries, by
Okay.
relating those enterprises with they have credit access and they have not credit access comparing. I don't know. Is it this doctoral level problem?
You can phrase a doctoral problem in there, but you have to really start looking at that. SMMEs have attracted massive interest internationally. Okay. Financing SMMEs is something that is really, really important because a number of studies have identified access to finances as a reason to failure. You might want to say, what causes failure, although finance has been granted? And look, if anybody has looked at reasons they fail for financial reasons, even though finance is available. Reasons for failure to access finance that has been provided. Reasons why provided finance is not attractive. So you have to go deeper and more precisely into it. In an area where there's a lot of research, you now have to find your very unique take on it. And if you start looking at why finance options are not attractive, just run that search and find how much there is around that. So you can phrase it is a problem. We know that it's a problem. Reference, 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 reference. Okay? But unfortunately, even if it's provided, people do not utilize that, still causing similar failures. What can be done to enhance the attractiveness or something around that? But you've got to be very, very careful in an area that has a lot of active research, that at a doctoral level especially. Remember, in 3 years' time, you still want to be at the forefront. Somebody else shouldn't have done exactly what you've done. Are you going to go for qualitative or quantitative angle?
More of quantity.
Then it's very, very important. Qualitative, you can deepen the knowledge, you can get richer information, but if you want to do a quantitative study, you've got to be very precise. Okay, let's carry on a little bit. I think everybody's falling asleep. Yeah, I can see a number of people. It's really horrible, isn't it? So you want to get your extracted. What you want to do by the end of this assignment is you want to have a problem. You've got to have the background. You substantiate it. You do that little trade-off of where you want to do your research, and it must be relevant, it must contribute, and it must be doable. Very simply. Okay, your problem, your trade-off. Very often what happens is you start your problem, you extract this problem, but you start with your whole problem area so wide. It makes reading very difficult. So you want to start by focusing your overall problem area to lead gradually into your research problem. So don't try and find something that's so small in your whole area, because then you're not going to contribute. You find a problem area that solving your research problem will contribute. You want to be able to see what's the practical problems. Very often your practical problems, when you start finding that thing, am I going to have problems answering it? Can I do it in time? Will I get a research supervisor? Will I have other funding? And funding is important. And does it make sense, and does it have meaning to you? I can come up with wonderful problems in that area that has no meaning to you. If it doesn't excite you, if it doesn't talk to you, it's not a good problem for you. It may be a perfect research problem, it might be a perfect doctoral problem, but it's not for you, because you cannot relate to it, you cannot live it, you can't live with it for the next few years. Okay, so that's very important. Will it contribute to the body of knowledge? Okay. Where is it reflected? Remember, will it stay available while I'm busy with it at the moment? Will I get the resources? Will it position me for the future? And then can I publish on it? If I can't publish on it, oops, and I'm in academia, I've got a problem here. Double oops. Okay, your problem gets your research aim. You've got to look at it. It is overall, complexity depends where you are. You've got to be able to substantiate it, even if you know it is definitely a problem. You can see it's a problem. You may end up having to write an academic journal article on why it's a problem, and then you can start from there. Very often you find that at a doctoral level you have to start off by scoping your own problem, by publishing on why it's a problem. So it's out there in the literature, then you use that. That's your literature. If it's not there, you can write it. Okay? So there's a variety of ways. Is the capacity and is the scope acceptable in your other constraints? It is not easy to do it part-time. All of you are doing it part-time. Can you fit it in?
Not all of them.
Who doesn't do it part-time? Who's not doing? Who's got the luxury of just doing this? They are too scared to admit. So because everybody else is going to beat you up, isn't it? Okay. Your substantiation requires knowledge of the subject area. So when I'm asking you initially, we're not asking you to substantiate and to give you exact areas where you're going to substantiate it. You've got to start understanding where you're going to look for the substantiation. But as your knowledge deepens, you'll be able to substantiate better. You've got to understand the context. If you start dealing with, say, in a developing area, and you're looking at SMMEs, and you don't really understand about SMMEs in the developing area, it's going to be difficult. So you've got to understand that. The level of study in your discipline. Some disciplines get away with, in the practice, it's a problem. That's very rarely acceptable. Okay? And if you really want to have giggles, try and read or watch or anything, a person that's doing their doctorate in fine arts. Okay, you don't actually see a thesis there. But I know of one guy that's doing his doctorate on evidence to provide when you're doing your art. So it's a beautiful area.
Can you use the fact that there isn't enough literature on the topic itself as substitute?
Yeah, you have to. That there isn't enough. But then you've got to prove it.
Okay.
And it's, as in any hypothesis, saying there isn't any. Okay? I will get you one, and I will prove your hypothesis wrong. So there isn't enough. You've got to describe what is around, what is not good enough, either not good enough, what does it actually deal with this context.
Can one approach it from a different angle where, for example, you're exposed to a certain industry, although I'm an academic as well, I'm exposed to an industry where I could go into the industry and have some discussions and interviews with these people and say, listen, I've got this feeling, or I've observed. Do you feel the same way? Did you experience the same problems? How would you formulate the problem? And then measure that with the different industries or the different committees or councils that you've got exposure to. That forms the basis of your problem instead of the theory.
What you're then talking is problem-based research. The way that you do is design science. The way that you go, or Mode 2 research with specifically design science, your evidence is then very similar to grounded research. So you go and you develop, read Eisenhardt, you developing a theory. So you're not really going out there and working with a theory, you're developing theory. It's inductive, it's Mode 2, and it's a bit of a pain to ground it in research. But if you start looking and you look at design science and you look at the 3 cycles, you can do it from that. There's a number of people that have serious issues with it. Some of the supervisors, some of the academics. I particularly love it and I support it fully because I think that is something that has meaning. But then I've got a very pragmatic epistemological viewpoint. It depends on what your external is going to say. So when you do that, you've got to be very, very careful and very thorough in your grounding part.
The thing is, in South African law industries, we don't have the research that, for example, in the international world would be. So it's something that's typical to our world. That's my hypothesis, to say that's typical to our world. Now I want to test my ideas or my perception with industry. So listen, but you're living in a dream world, or you're right, this is exactly what we experience, and then I want to move from.
But what you're doing there is the first phase of problem-based, is you have to substantiate that problem exists in industry. That's not merely 1 or 2 interviews, that's probably a process that you do qualitative analysis on that to prove there's a field-based problem. And then you go through that. But it's not about solving that field-based problem. In design science, you can do action research. Probably you're going to, if you're an academic, you're going to do participative action research in the process to come up with theories on how to actually deal with it in this area, ground that theories in the known theory, and then prove that this new bit is a significant contribution in the theory and the knowledge base that exists. It's a 3-loop system. It's a bit of a pain, but it does It can be done. I firmly believe in it, but it is a bit of an uphill battle. It is possible to do qualitative research in engineering. Okay? It's painful. You decide if you want. In all of the things, you know, you have to decide. But I firmly believe it's possible. It's just very, very.
I've done it, but the most difficult part is to convince your colleagues.
Yeah, well, I've also done it. The difficult part is when your external says what happens.
You have to pick your externals very well, and you don't need to pick them.
Yeah, there's a long and very philosophical debate about that. Sometimes you want to change the world. Fortunately, at that time, I was not in academia. I was busy proving a point, and many probably big fighter in my personality as well. All of these things are possible. It just makes your road your way to go harder. So you've got to take that into consideration. I can get you the articles and the references on that process. Okay, a problem is something that has consequences. This happened, it leads to good things, I want to make it happen more often. Or this happens, it leads to bad things, I want to stop the bad things from happening. Then you work to an aim. Your research aim is, this study will solve this thing, and it will, in order to solve whatever the problems is, the consequences are. Title. We're going to talk about title again. Your problem area, your problem statement translates in your title. Now, there are rules about titles, and people have different feelings about it. But any form of title has to have an action word in. Okay? What are you doing? It has to talk about 2 or more variables and the relationship between those variables. So when you look at it, we'll deal that. It may have the strategy of your research in there, a case study, or a ethnological whatever.
Our FHDC prefers that you don't put that in.
Yeah, that's why I say it may have that. It may have the context in a developing world, in a this, but it should not be more than 10 words, okay? You can try it, but people get uncomfortable at more than 10 words. 11 words, okay, 12 words maybe. Above that,
So what?
probably a red pen, cross this out. What on earth? Try and condense your thoughts. Okay, so what's assignment 1? That's the one that you're going to now grapple. Consider your topic area. The exact brief of this would be available. Consider your topic area. Within this area, there might be a number of possible research problems. Identify the research problem that you want to address. Okay. Remember, we've spoken a lot, and it might have sounded repetitive, but what makes a good problem? Then what you do is you tell first what is the context of this problem. Very often when you start reading the introduction, you have to put your reader onto your piece of paper. You invite us into your world. You're saying this is it. So you have to be able to say what is the context in which this problem exists. Okay? How clear have you got the problem? Context. Have you defined the problem? Very often you find people, they think you should know the problem, but you live so close to that. We can't open your brain and see what's your problem. You've got to write it down. Okay? Have you got it empirically substantiated? Do you have it substantiated through the body of knowledge? Is there a rationale, the so what in there? Is the aim of the research, I want to solve the problem in order to clear? Have you identified what you're contributing? Remember, at a master's level, you're also contributing. You may not be contributing to the body of knowledge, but you have to make some contribution. Have you identified it, and have you substantiated what's the issue? Is it useful? Whatever you're doing, is it useful in your area? Will it be used? Will it contribute to business? It's really, really important from a business perspective. Are you aware of the ethical considerations? Now, we're going to talk about ethics this Saturday. So we're talking about that. You don't have to worry about that now. And once again, is your contribution explicit? Once again, precisely what you're going to contribute. The format, you see it's a Word document, and it has a little block in which you have to put things in. You don't have to use long, convoluted sentences. You can start by writing some sentences, put bullet points in, whatever you want to. You want to be able to communicate with your supervisor what this is about, so that your supervisor can give you feedback. If you've done this, okay, then it's very quickly possible for your supervisor to make suggestions around your research methodology and what you're going to do, the last 2 items on your 150 word summary. Most of your 150 word summary is in there. So those of you that have not registered, you should be able to have your registration done at least by the time of assignment 2. But you have to be able to do this. What's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of feedback. And as you know, when you start articulating it, if I put you on a spot here and ask you, okay, what's your problem? Most of you would get really, really worried about telling me, wouldn't you? You know what your problem is. But until you have written it down, your supervisor cannot give you feedback. So the first thing is to put it down so that we have a starting point to communicate from. Put it down. Then it's define your problem. Be clear about it. And in the beginning it's very difficult because you're pushing. Remember the people that I've spoken to, I've been pushing to get your problem into areas. Then you've got to tell me, what's the consequences of this problem? So what? What's happening? What happens because it's a problem? What sources are you going to use empirically? Say, all that you have to put in there is things like the Auditor General's report, World Bank reports, reports from, if you want to work in construction, the construction industry reports. What is it that's going to tell people that this is a problem, this is really a problem? What sources will you use from the theory? Remember, and there you don't have to give those references in lines yet. You've got to say, I am going to look at theory around this area to support this bit. Theory around this area to support that bit. You have to start thinking how you're going to put it together. And then you have to have the rationale of the study clear. So what? Quite repeatedly. It's a 2-page document. It's not very difficult to write, but it is quite difficult to think until you can write it. Okay. It is, you have to put it into My Tutor. Please note there's a name. Now, one of the big things that you have to realize is just look around you. This document is going to hit My Tutor. Somebody's going to open them one by one, get very, very angry if they can't work out whose it is. So in your name of the file, please put your surname, underscore assignment 1, your supervisor's surname, because whatever is in there has to be directed to your supervisor as well for feedback. Please don't mess up on your names. You're just going to get people agitated, and you don't want, all of you as academics, you don't want somebody agitated when they start marking. Okay, it's bad practice. You will get your feedback on that by the 25th of April on this. So you've got to hand it in, it's got to go through. You'll see that the time frame between when you hand it in and you get feedback is very, very short. There's a week. So we need it on time so that we can give you feedback as soon as possible.
Yeah, so up to now, we've been playing Mr. Nice Guy, and yes, you can hand it in a bit later, and yes, you can have an extension here, and from assignment 1 to assignment 5, there's no Mr. Nice Guy. You have to hand it in on time.
Sorry? What is that?
Sorry? Oh, okay, the abstract.
The abstract. You'll deal with the abstract after you've done this. When we're talking about assignment 2, okay, I will talk about that because you know what assignment 2 is about. So we're not going to go so intensely into assignment 2, then we'll talk about the abstract as well.
But I've just given it to you so that when you work through your research problem, you can see what it is that, according to the TUT template, you need to put in your abstract in terms of that.
Okay, anything else? Yes? If you can't get to my tutor by Monday, you will be invited to come down and talk. Isn't that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, okay, look, if you guys really have a problem of access, what we are going to do is we're going to make a lab available for the students. And you can then go into the lab and you can upload your assignment. Okay. So until, well, basically next week Thursday, the lab when you were this afternoon will be open from, let's say, 3 o'clock to until the workshop time, and you can then go and you can upload your assignment there. If you don't have internet access.
Your due dates are always on Thursdays, so you can come in the
So you
afternoons.
can come in